This has not been a great time for genius. The people who claim to have it do not seem to qualify for it. The people who diagnose it in others seem to have a very, very narrow definition in mind. And the people we can all agree are stone-cold geniuses always seem to have a dark side. I read in Bloomberg Businessweek about the biggest crypto genius of them all, Sam Bankman-Fried. At his peak, he was worth like $26 billion. And that was before he was accused of running one of the biggest frauds in American history. His defense is that he is not a criminal, essentially, just inept. What does it mean to have genius in work, in the marketplace, in life? And who is even to say? To make anything simple takes actual genius, and we're going to try to live up to that name together tonight. It's the Business Week Show. Hello, I am Max Abelson, and I'm not a genius, just a regular, like slightly above average journalist who has spent about the last decade and a half here at Bloomberg News, and sometimes our magazine, Bloomberg Businessweek, writing about Wall Street's money and power. And what that means is I write about ambition and ownership and imagination and survival and risk and second acts and, of course, genius. Tonight, and in the weeks to come, we are going to be talking about those things at this table with people whose lives and careers and ideas are big or interesting or just really fun. So, welcome. This is the Business Week Show, and it's starting right now. If you consider yourself a master of Wall Street, a connoisseur of investing, a soothsaying financial genius, a brilliant portfolio manager, our guest has very bad news for you. Burt Malkiel's book, A Random Walk Down Wall Street, 50 years ago, had a clear and vivid message, which was that Wall Street genius is really just an illusion, and that professionals in pinstripe suits, at the end of the day, are no better than naked animals. It was a genius and radical idea, because what he had to say is that you should forget them and just buy and hold clear, boring, basic, low-cost index funds. He is here to tell us about it. Burt Malkiel, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Glad to be here.
Your book is actually, it's pretty funny. It's a little saucy sometimes, your book. I mean, you say no one in finance can really forecast the future, or at least they can't do it successfully, consistently. You know, I think you use the word genius in quotation marks, and you give it to Ponzi schemers and whatnot. Right now, are there any actual individual geniuses on Wall Street? You know, real human geniuses, maybe AI is the genius we've been all waiting for. Can you identify any current geniuses on Wall Street right now?
Well, as you know, I put genius in quotes because I'm not sure there are geniuses in the market. And I've always said I would much rather be lucky than smart. Are there some hedge fund people who have in fact, made a lot of money? George Soros bet against the British pound and made a lot of money. There were people who sold short in 2000 and made a lot of money. But I am not willing to say that they were geniuses. I want to say that they were lucky, because for every one of them, there was a hedge fund that in fact lost money. No, I don't think there are geniuses. I think there are a lot of very smart people on Wall Street, but it is not possible to predict the future. And, you know, it's kind of very interesting how you talk about AI. I recently had to give a presentation on the economic outlook. And I thought, you know, just for kicks, I will go to ChatGPT and I will ask, can you give me an outline of what I should say. And actually, ChatGPT gave me a wonderful answer. It was a one-sentence answer. I cannot predict the future.
It might not necessarily qualify as genius, but you're able to write about Wall Street with clarity, which is really unusual because Wall Street, and I suffer from this myself, you speak to Wall Street executives and they absolutely fetishize complexity. Why does Wall Street like to make things sound so complicated? Is there something sinister or something that has to do with the ego?
I don't know whether it's sinister, but this is a very highly paid profession. And someone like me who says, listen, don't listen to anybody. Just buy a simple index fund and keep on investing period after period. If I'm charging you 2% a year to manage your money, I want you to think you can't do it yourself. So sure, you've got a vested interest. This is a very highly paid profession. And these guys do very, very well. Is that sinister? I don't know. You call it sinister, anything you want, but is there an incentive to make it seem like it's very complicated, that ordinary people can't do it themselves? I think that's absolutely right.
The honest truth is, it's not necessarily that I think that the aura of complexity on Wall Street is coming from a sinister place. More like it makes me feel bad or makes me feel dumb, and that I appreciate that your book is sort of written so that I can understand it. But it does make me think about exclusion in a small way, because so many stocks are owned by so few people in this country, because the very wealthiest people in America have such giant portfolios, that when the stock market goes up, inequality goes up too. Is there anything that can be done to change that in the future?
One of the things that's impressed me throughout my life is really how capable so many people are. And I think to the extent that we can eliminate discrimination, I mean, for example, opening up our jobs, our economic opportunities to women has been a very good thing, and I think has been generally helpful for women. I think it's the same sort of thing in terms of racial discrimination. I am absolutely convinced that rather than there being just a small coterie of geniuses, that intelligence is very widely distributed in our population. And so my own sense would be the more we can do with education, the better.
Why is it that we need geniuses, or really just the concept of genius? Is it like the way we need heroes and heroism, to help just explain the world and justify?
I think we need innovators, and I'm not saying that innovation isn't good. We absolutely do, but I'm not going to call them geniuses. And Jack Bogle would certainly never have called himself a genius. But I think we do need innovators. There will undoubtedly be financial products that are actually good for one. I'm not a fan of Bitcoin. I don't think, I don't recommend that any investor buy it. But will there be improvements in the payment system in the future? And will there be digital currencies in the future that are stable and that are useful, as opposed to something that goes up $1,000 or down $1,000 in a day? Absolutely. And there's room for much more innovation in finance. So I think there will be innovation. There should be innovation. I just wouldn't call it genius.
That was great. Burt Malkiel, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed our conversation.
Stay tuned, because next we have a very far out genius. There is no one way to be a genius. You could be dreamy and far out. You could be scrupulous and scientific. You could work within the institutional establishment, or you could honor indigenous wisdom. All of those descriptions apply to this guest. Moraba Jah is a space environmentalist, an astrodynamicist, a spacecraft navigator, and the first African-American professor of aerospace engineering at the University of Texas. Last year, the MacArthur Foundation gave him a fellowship that is informally known as a Genius Grant. So, if you want, you could call him a genius, you could call him Professor Jah, but you'd rather you call him Moraba. So, Moraba, welcome.
Great to be here, my brother. Thank you so much.
Really glad to have you. I really love the phrase, a stroke of genius. You were in Alaska with your family in a hotel one morning. I think you were taking a shower.
Yeah.
And you had this feeling and this vision that kind of struck you. And whether or not it has anything at all to do with genius. Tell us about that moment.
I'm in the shower, and I felt a presence. And in my mind's eye, I saw flashes of scenes from like history and how in the beginning, whatever that means, it seems like there was this intergenerational contract of stewardship with the planet, but that humanity over time has mostly abandoned that intergenerational contract of stewardship and has forgotten about how interconnected things are.
Did that moment change the life you led and the work that you do?
Absolutely. So one of the people that I really look up to is Jane Goodall. I watched something about Jane where she said that she went to a meeting as a scientist and she left that meeting an activist. In very similar ways, I went to Anchorage kind of just this scientist, and I came back both a scientist and now this space environmentalist activist to really try to, I guess, really showcase how we need to protect orbital space.
If there's a kind of genius that means something to you, something that you would want to live up to, or something you'd want to recognize in yourself, what would that kind of genius like actually look like?
To me, the best kind of genius is simply allowing myself to let the universe go through me and I guess use me as some sort of vehicle for the work that I'm trying to do. And if I can keep myself kind of in the moment and in a place of compassion and empathy, then I think genius is just what comes through when you allow that to happen.
There's more garbage orbiting the Earth than there are working satellites. You now work not just to make sure that all that stuff is properly tracked, but to be an evangelist for expanding the way we think about environmental protection so that it includes all that stuff. What can those of us who are not scientists, what can we do to help you?
Every day, the technologies that we have are more and more reliant on these robots in the space that we call satellites. And we're tracking about 50,000 things ranging in size from a cell phone to the space station. 5,000 are working and everything else is garbage. So that's like 90% of the stuff is trash. The thing that most people just don't realize is that these satellites that are providing these critical services and capabilities, position, navigation, timing, communications, internet with the Starlink satellites, right? Any of these things can get schwacked, that's the technical term, get schwacked by a piece of junk, and that's game over, and then you lose that capability. So I think more and more people just need to be aware that, oh, well, that space, that's somebody else's problem. No, it's our problem because our way of life, our technology is now going through this infrastructure.
There's a real stereotypical idea of genius that I'm thinking of a kind of solitary genius working by herself or himself off in a fun cabin, you know? What does it mean, what would it mean to be a genius collaborator?
Back in the times of like the Renaissance, people looked at folks like, Da Vinci, Michelangelo, and they said, okay, these are geniuses in their own right, right? And people say, well, how can anybody be like another one of those? Science has developed so much beyond those days that there's no way for somebody to be able to be, quote unquote, this Renaissance person that knows very deeply things in all these different fields. Like those days are gone, okay? But to me, the real genius is recognizing where you bring in smart people from other fields that complement and augment your own to solve wicked problems.
Yeah, connectedness, connections with one another. But my understanding, though, from reading a little bit of your writing, is that you were, I think in your childhood, you felt really isolated.
I did, yeah. My mom was born in Haiti, and she was naturalized citizen. My father, Sierra Leone, naturalized citizen. They got divorced when I was very young, and yeah, my father was just very abusive. At the age of 7, he kidnapped me, and 9 days later, they found me in some apartment in the Bay Area, put me back on a plane to my mom. And my mom had, we had a cousin that lived in Caracas, and so we fled the country because my mom's like, I don't want your father to ever find you again. He never did physically again. But growing up in Venezuela, I felt very isolated. I felt very alone. I came into contact in this void with what seemed to feel like an ocean of infinite love and compassion. And then I realized, I have a choice here. I can choose to meet my experiences with equal anger, or I can choose to act from a place of love and compassion and heal from my pain and make my healing be of service to others. And that's what I've chosen to do.
When the MacArthur Foundation, when they named you a fellow, they said it was because, they used a beautiful phrase, it's because you envision transparent and collaborative solutions for the Earth's orbital spheres. What are those solutions? And maybe when are they coming?
My inspiration for this comes from indigenous people, from traditional ecological knowledge, TEK, I call it ancient tech. And so for me, the vision of my future is seeing Western science and traditional ecological knowledge come together, not annihilate each other, but actually harmonize with each other, so that then that could be the way of the future, so that humanity does recognize interconnectedness, empathy, and stewardship.
Thank you so much for being here and sharing your story, sharing yourself.
Thank you, brother.
Truly enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Coming up next, a genius I would like to be when I grow up. Getting older is not easy, but the good news is time brings opportunities to become a more practiced, a more seasoned, a more you version of you. The guest who's sitting with me at this table is one of the most accomplished people I've ever met, and she is 17 years old. In 2021, Zaila Avantgarde won the Scripps National Spelling Bee. But She considers herself not so much a speller as a basketball player, and she has multiple Guinness World Records in juggling. A few weeks ago, this young genius started the 11th grade. Zaila, so glad you're here.
Thanks for having me.
Truth is, we're all super different. We all have our own gifts. We all have our own limitations. When and how did you come to realize how special you are?
So that's a complicated question, I would say, because I didn't so much realize, I realized I was special, but I became special through a process of like training and stuff. If you look back on it, like I wouldn't say I popped out the womb like a genius or something like that. It's like when people would start to stop and look at me while I was dribbling or practicing at a court, people like stop and look because, hey, look at this cute little girl. I was very small when I was that age. So this cute little girl dribbling 2 balls and doing all this between the legs, step backs into shots and stuff. So pretty early on, I realized that, yeah, I might be a little bit different than the average kid.
You won this like completely beloved national competition, but it's something that I think you no longer consider your main passion, or maybe you didn't even consider it your main passion then. What does basketball make you feel that spelling doesn't?
I would say basketball gives me even more of like the competitive rush. Like I just really love to compete and stuff. So like, and like spelling is more like, yes, it's not really like person-to-person competition. It's more like person versus dictionary, which is something you hear a lot from spelling bee people. It's like it's me versus the dictionary, because that's where the words are coming from. Whereas with basketball, it's more like physical competition. Like, oh, I made it between the legs, and there's this girl on me, and I have to shield her off. And it's like more tangible competition, as opposed to the more philosophical competition of spelling.
I want to ask you about a very different kind of genius. There's this billionaire named Sam Bankman-Fried. Think you've heard of him?
Of course.
Widely considered to be the world's, great crypto genius before he was then charged with fraud, which he has denied. How should the rest of us look at people who get called geniuses, but maybe they still have shortcomings, just like everybody else?
Sometimes I feel like the term genius is like nowadays it's so loaded. Like maybe it's like, oh, it doesn't just mean, oh, look at her, she's a genius, like she's so smart or whatever. But like then like if you're labeled with that like your whole life, that kind of like puts a pressure on you. Like maybe once upon a time, like I listened to a podcast about Sam Bankman-Fried, but I don't know him personally, so I can't speak for him. But hypothetically, like he's like his parents are like, oh my God, you're so smart. He goes to accelerated programs in school, and that's just putting pressure from a very early age. Like I'm a genius, I have to be a genius, I have to always be a genius. So I always feel like people, like some of the scammers and stuff, should get maybe just a little bit of sympathy, just a little bit, because they are like causing all sorts of trouble, because like they've been considered geniuses their whole life, and they had a nice business plan or something, but then it didn't work out. And so what are they supposed to do? Go to all these people who say, oh, you're a genius? That just puts a little pressure on you to like give you that extra push you needed to try to maybe go into the murky waters of life.
The murky waters of life. I want to ask you one final question about pressure. I think that there is sometimes pressure in the United States, maybe everywhere, pressure on really smart people, genius or otherwise, to use their intelligence to like make a lot of money, to be successful. And like I guess I'm thinking specifically about the finance industry and mathematicians, but it's true of the business world. You're smart, you go make money in business. Do you have a favorite company or an industry or like a job that appeals to you?
I mean, I'm not like super like make millions of dollars. I mean, if anybody who's watching or listening wants to give me millions of dollars, please hit me up. However, like I'm interested in going to neuroscience, or maybe working for NASA, or maybe being an NBA head coach. But I just realized I've never thought, how much money would I get for this? Because that's not really something like I think of, because you can make a lot of money, not to sound trite, but you can also be really miserable making a lot of money. So that's not even something I actually consider, like how much money will I make? I'll cross that bridge when it comes.
Zaila, you're gonna cross the bridge, you're gonna have a great time. I have had a great time talking to you. I'm thrilled you're here.
Thanks for having me.
When you ask geniuses, as I just did, what a genius is, or if we need geniuses, or if they're a genius, the answer you'll get will be genius. It turns out that there is not one way to be a genius of finance or of art or of language, just as there is not one way to think about genius itself. What matters is not what you call unusually high levels of intelligence or talent. What matters is what you do with it. Thank you so much for watching the first episode of the Business Week Show. We'll see you again for another one soon.
I am a completely virtuous person. I have no missing virtues. But I do wish I could sing.
People clearly tend to be impatient where they should be patient.
I waste the most money on champagne. I love champagne every day. Every day I have 2 glasses of champagne. That's my thing. 2 glasses of champagne every day.
Risk is everywhere. It is a risk to get out of bed, take a sip of coffee, step into the street, shake someone's hand, eat a tuna melt. Trust risks betrayal, authenticity risks rejection, and if you want to play it safe, doing nothing risks missing out on everything. We associate risk with what you might lose, but there is no winning in the marketplace without it. If anyone ever comes up to you and offers you something that is completely risk-free, buyer beware. Nothing ventured, nothing gained. I read this thing in Bloomberg Business Week about Silicon Valley Bank, which bought billions of dollars of bonds, a risk. Then the value of those bonds fell, depositors went running out the door. And the impact of that risk was one of the biggest bank failures in the history of this country. What does it feel like to take risk in business and in life? We're going to try to find out from actual risk takers. It's a risk. We're going to take it together, and we're going to take it tonight.
It's the Business Week Show.
Welcome to the Business Week Show. Tonight, risk. The very idea of who gets to take financial risk in global markets and how they go about taking that risk, and then how they talk about that risk, changed thanks to tonight's first guest. In 2012, Jamie Rogozinski logged onto Reddit, he started a new page, and he called it Wall Street Bets. In the years that followed, it got millions of users. It sparked real frenzies in stocks like GameStop and AMC, and at one point, it got its own Super Bowl ad. But As you may imagine, things did not work out all that well for everyone, and Jamie is here tonight to tell us all about it. Jamie, seriously, thanks for being here.
Thanks a lot for having me.
Risk is a funny thing because it freaks some people out, me included, but there's also something about it that is so attractive and so tantalizing. Why have you been so drawn to it?
Risk is a funny thing because when people say risk, especially when you frame it that way, the implication is either there's an element of randomness, right, or that's the outcome can be very, very costly because it's either unlikely to pay out or the actual, chance of losing might be really costly. But the way that I see risk is really, if you're able to actually quantify those elements, it's really a price that you pay for an opportunity. The way that I look at risk in that sense, it's not that I'm attracted to these thrill seeks. It's, I think this is worth it, right? I think I can identify these are the probabilities or possibilities, and sometimes I can't, but at least I can map them out. And this is what the possible outcome is. And I'm like, let's do this.
Okay, let's do this. Let's really talk about that, because what you're saying is you're really talking about what it means for something to be risky. When you started Wall Street Bets, the way you've talked about it is that you said you wanted a place where people could talk about risky ideas, and they could talk about it kind of proudly, risky trade ideas. You were enabling other people to take risks. So can you tell us, like, what worries did you have at the time that things potentially could go wrong for them?
You know, my definition, my understanding and my position on risk has evolved, right? It's become clear as the years gone by. And early on, I justified this by saying, well, look, they're all adults. You have to be 18 in order to open a brokerage. Same thing if you go to a casino, everyone can go through. And when I said I wanted to be able to discuss high risk, I wanted to discuss high risk, high return, right? It wasn't just high risk is throwing your money out the window and having it go away with 100% certainty. This was high risk with the possibility of making money. And those two obviously go hand in hand. There are some that are irresponsible with it, but I can't make myself responsible in much the same way that there's gambling addicts, right? But outside of that, what I start seeing is a learning process, much like the one that I personally went through. I lost tons of money, but I walked away with so much knowledge and understanding and hands-on experience that a textbook can never explain to you.
I want to ask you about someone who sort of counts as your really, really complete opposite, Jack Bogle. He was the founder of Vanguard. He helped popularize the very vanilla, very boring idea that if you're an investor, you can diversify your bets. He ended up popularizing the index fund. How did it feel?
Take you through the salient points, but the key message here, is that they are suspending bombing and the attack of Iran for 2 weeks. Based on conversations, and I'm paraphrasing the U.S. president here based on that post, based on conversations with Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif of Pakistan, wherein, of course, a few hours back, Pakistan requested for a ceasefire or an extension to the deadline of 2 weeks, subject to Iran agreeing to a complete, immediate, and safe opening of the Strait of Hormuz. The U.S. agrees to suspend the bombing and attack of Iran for a period of 2 weeks. This will be a double-sided ceasefire. So far, that is the key message. He's also acknowledged that the U.S. has received a 10-point proposal from Iran and believe it is a workable basis on which to negotiate. So the key message, conversations are taking place according to the U.S. president. They are looking at this 10-point proposal from Iran. We have yet to hear, by the way, from the Iranians at this point in time. Let me just caveat that as well. But the key message right now, as we approached that deadline of 8 p.m. Eastern time, we now understand that there will be a 2-week ceasefire to finalize these talks. On your screens, we're looking at markets, and it's a big decline we're seeing right now in oil. West Texas is down about 8%. U.S. futures are seeing some upside as we speak. The Bloomberg Dollar Index, which is a gauge of risk appetite at this point in time, is also seeing some reaction on the back of favorable news as it pertains to the Iran war. I'm looking at my futures board as we go into the thick of the session approaching the market, the key opens of major markets here in the Asia Pacific. We're looking at futures in Japan called higher, a couple of 100 points. We are now, I can tell you, at session highs, 91 points on S&P futures. So markets are taking this, and they are taking this well in stride. I'm just looking across my other screens as well, just to give an indication. And you know, the next few hours, we'll see the likes of Japan, Korea open up, and I imagine, given the direction of travel where you are with futures, this will be taken positively by markets. We're looking at the yen, in fact, also gaining right now. We're now at 159.13. Ahead of the cash markets in treasuries, we're looking at treasury futures gaining. So yields are, in fact, set to open lower in the Asia Pacific. The yen is higher. Futures are gaining. So we are looking at, generally speaking, a cross-asset move that is indicative of more risk being put into portfolios today, given the news and the breaking news here that we are looking at a 2-week ceasefire, double-sided ceasefire according to President Trump. Trump says that a ceasefire is subject to the Strait of Hormuz opening up. Now, that is an important caveat here because so far we've heard from the Americans, we've yet to see, of course, whether the Iranian side will be agreeing to those conditions that would then put in place, based on my understanding of how I'm reading this, the extension of the ceasefire, the imposition of a ceasefire for a period of 2 weeks. We are, I guess, in many, many ways right now, just waiting to hear whether or not this is agreeable to the other side. Taking a step back, a few hours back, in case you're joining us, a few hours back, we had reports that the Pakistanis had been requesting the U.S. For an extension of the deadline. That deadline was, of course, supposed to have expired in about, from this point in time, about 90 minutes from now. And we now understand that the U.S. had received that outreach coming out of Pakistan. They have also received this 10-point proposal from Iran, and that they now believe it is a workable basis on which to negotiate to further those talks over the next 2 weeks or so. A couple of things I also want to mention, too, as we go into the thick of things here in the Asia Pacific and as markets come online one by one. Number one is Hong Kong reopens today after a very long weekend. So we'll see what market reaction will be as far as that was concerned. If you judge things by price action, Monday, most markets in Asia Pacific were shut. Tuesday, most markets had opened up with the exception of Hong Kong. You had that rally, of course, into the close on Wall Street. We did come off substantially lows of the session there, and as far as the S&P was concerned, on the back of the report of Pakistan. So the direction of travel going into the session today in the Asia Pacific, particularly the reopen here in Hong Kong, is a positive one. The other thing I want to note as well, as we look at this continued reaction, this extension of declines we're seeing in the oil markets, Brent is also set to come online very shortly, and we probably and likely will see that drop, of course, from the close yesterday. The other thing as well, there's an interesting caveat that's taking place and nuance in the energy markets where you do have futures markets currently. When you look at West Texas, I imagine you'll see that in Brent, pricing in a de-escalation short term. The other thing to consider is the physical market and this long tail theoretical, assuming things do de-escalate over the next, let's call it 48 hours or so. Let's call it 2 weeks. How long do oil markets need to heal and get the physical tightness in this market back to normal? When you look at things like dated Brent, which closed at a record overnight, 100, north of 140, that is an indication that apart from the anticipatory nature of markets looking at futures, we are still dealing with extreme tightness in the physical market. You look at backwardation in the oil markets, you look at contracts from the front end to the seventh contract down the futures curve. These are things to consider as we go into the thick of things today. Now, I can tell you we're down about 10% in as far as markets go. Now, a couple of other things, right? A couple of other things. We are also looking at a further decline. Yes, I can tell you now we're at 10% on West Texas. S&P futures are not session highs. I'm looking at my futures board in as far as the Japanese futures are concerned. Guys, can we get that up, please, so our viewers can see this approach to the Japanese Open, please? We're looking at, I'm giving you guys the tickers now. NXA, let's look at Chicago. Up 1,635 points, up 3%. NXA commodity on your Bloomberg terminal. Let's have a look at that. We are also likely going to see the Kospi index. I also mentioned, just give me a second here, I'm just balancing a lot of the things on my screens. ASX 200, Aussie yen. Can we get that up, please, if we can as well? So we are going into the Aussie session, should be coming online in a couple of minutes as well. Indicative of this risk appetite that's back in markets. Now, a couple of things I want to caveat as well. As you look at this clearly very encouraging piece of news and developments coming through out of the U.S., we are now waiting to see whether or not that specific condition that the U.S. president has asked for, this complete reopening of the Strait of Hormuz, will be met. We'll wait for a response coming from the other side. The other thing we can track is, of course, whether or not we will see a substantial pickup in vessel traffic, and there's a way we can do that on the Bloomberg terminal. Suffice to say, there's lots to talk about as we go into the thick of things. It's Wednesday. A couple of other things I want to note. Apart from this, clearly, when you look at risk appetite, it's back on the table. Look at volumes. Volumes have been on the heavier side on down days. They have been extremely light on most days. We have seen gains. So we'll really see what markets make of this and what they make of this 2-week time in as far as the time horizon is concerned. Just to recap, in case you're just joining us right now, breaking news out of the White House. The U.S. president has agreed to a 2-week ceasefire. And we will bring you more details and any more reactions once we hear them, of course, from the other side or any of the key stakeholders involved. That's it from us now on this breaking news. Lots more ahead here on Bloomberg Television.
My last bottom, which was in January of 2018, I holed myself up in an apartment. I only left to get alcohol. I drank around the clock, and I made an attempt on my life. So if I continued drinking, I'm convinced that I would have killed myself. After that episode, I made a decision that I wanted to live, and I knew if I wanted to live, I had to stop drinking.
Look, I mean, we have a professional relationship, so part of me feels like it's hard to say this, but it's also hard not to say it. You know, I'm glad you made that decision. A lot of people who are miserable, they don't get out of their misery.
Yeah.
You know, they stay there.
So the reality is there are a lot of drug addicts and alcoholics in the world, and the vast majority of them do not get sober and do not get clean, and they die alcoholic and addict deaths. That's the reality. So those of us who have made it to recovery, don't take it for granted, number one, and two, realize that it was a gift. And it's a gift that has to be nourished all the time, because if you take it for granted, you're going to wind up right back on the street.
When you came out, you got, I think, literal bouquets from traders at Goldman. I think you got like these very warm notes from people. I think you got phone calls.
Yeah.
Those were from traders, and they were not from investment bankers. And you write in the book with clarity, investment bankers were quiet. I was so surprised by that. What can you explain that? Why did that happen?
I think probably some of my relationships with investment bankers were shallower than I thought. And I think investment bankers are very good at having really expansive relationships kind of across a wide group of people. But, you know, maybe some of those relationships aren't as deep as they would appear.
I love that you're accusing investment bankers writ large of a certain kind of interpersonal shallowness.
I'm not sure I said it exactly
well, that is exactly
way.
as you said it. No. I'm hoping that you'll...
You're not going to put words in my mouth, are you?
Well, I'm the interviewer now.
Yeah.
You know, I asked you earlier about male privilege. Coming out as trans in the milieu of, first of all, New York City, where we are, but also a corporation, which I'm sure, as I'm also keenly aware, has a lot of pressures too. Can you talk, if you want to at all, about, I don't know, maybe the kind of privileges that come with having a really good career as you do?
Sure. So I certainly have white privilege. I have the privilege of having worked at Goldman Sachs. I'm relatively well off. I live in the Chelsea section of New York, which is arguably the best place to be an out transgender person in the world. And even before I left Goldman Sachs, I began to, and I've continued to be, an advocate or activist for the LGBTQ community more broadly, because, you know, not everybody is in a position to speak out. Not everybody wants to speak out, but I'm in a position to, and I want to speak out, so I'm going to.
Thank you so much for being here. I really enjoyed this.
Thanks for having me, Max.
If the names RZA, Jizza, and Old Dirty Bastard mean anything to you, or if you've ever been moved by the music of A Tribe Called Quest or D'Angelo, then you owe a debt of thanks to Sophia Chang. As an artist manager and as a music label executive, she helped shape the landscape of a golden age of New York City rap in the 1990s in a way that would be totally under-celebrated if it weren't for her own book, which is called The Baddest Bitch in the Room. It's a book about the music business, but it's also a book about taking risks, some that work out and some that don't. We've talked tonight about personal risks. We've talked about professional risks. We've talked about financial risks. Sophia's story is a story about what happens when those things come together. Sophia Chang, welcome to the show.
I am so excited to be here. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
You manage Old Dirty Bastard without any experience as a manager. You ran RZA's record label without any experience running a record label. I think you say in the book that risk is in my DNA.
Did I?
You do.
I wonder if I plagiarized that from somebody. That's really clever.
Risk-taking was in my DNA. Sophia, why is that?
I would say certainly my parents' stories have a lot to do with that. My mother, Tungsuk Chang, born in 1932, she escaped North Korea when she was 14. She was one of 10 siblings. That was a huge risk. It was a very risky boat ride. My father He was, God rest his soul, he was estranged from his father, and he took a risk when he studied mathematics in Vancouver. They went to Canada to build a better life for their family. So none of that was explicit in my head as a child, but I think that that's probably the model. And I think the other thing that really supported my journey and my risk-taking was that my parents, every move that I made, they encouraged me. After I moved to New York, I didn't have a job. I didn't have a place. Their peers would say, your daughter, what's she doing? Get her back.
They would have had a good answer, because when you moved to New York, I think one of the first jobs you had was working for Paul Simon.
Paul Simon, yeah.
Paul Simon had a personal assistant who I think was a Korean-American woman.
That's right.
And I think she taught you almost explicitly that it was important for you to take up space in a room. How is, not just confidence, but something like unapologetic confidence, how is that a risk?
I think when you take an intersectional view of this, right? When you think about the fact that I am a woman and I am Asian, and I mostly navigated, Max, very male-dominated milieu. And yes, I remember, her name is Sonia Che, God rest her soul, and I remember watching her move and I thought, wow, and she was smaller than me. She would just burst into a room and you could just feel her. She didn't have to yell, she didn't have to do any of that, but her energy just emanated off of her. And I really took that lesson from her.
But, it occurs to me that you talk about losing the fear of embarrassing yourself.
Yes.
I think when you're at like Atlantic Records, in an early job.
Yeah.
People have a fear of embarrassing themselves for a reason, because it's self-protected. It's a kind of shield.
Yeah.
So it occurs to me to ask, maybe the question I really want to know is why is it so risky to be yourself?
I think that in general, we as humans operate out of fear, just in general. So if we're in a meeting and there are 10 people sitting around the table, and maybe I'm junior and I have an idea, my fear, and even if I think it's so smart, my fear is I open my mouth and everybody goes, and it's like the record scratch, rewind, and then everybody looks. I think we all live with a real fear of humiliation, embarrassment, excommunication, reprisal.
Right.
So I have gotten to the point where I just don't care. I mean, it's so incredibly liberating not to care what other people think. It doesn't mean that I don't get my feelings hurt. For me to be out here speaking as openly and fearlessly as I do, I know from people who come up to me that I'm setting an example.
One way of thinking about risk is that it's a kind of bet on the unknown.
Yes, of course.
It's a way of endorsing one kind of future over another. What are the risks, or maybe a single risk, that you still want to take?
I feel like I take risks all the time. I feel like my life is full of risk, and that does feel reckless, but I just turned 58 and I want to fall in love again. And that's really scary for a woman over 35. Never mind a woman over 40, over 50, close to 60. And what does that mean for a woman of a certain age to want to fall in love again? Well, that means you've got to put yourself out there. That's a risk. Because of patriarchy, because of ageism, because of all of those things.
Well, I wish you love, and I wish you many happy risks.
Thank you.
Sophia Chang, seriously, I loved having you here.
And I love being here. Thank you so, so much.
Thank you. Tonight, our three guests, with three very different careers, showed us that you can take just about any risk you want at work and outside of work if you've got the risk appetite and you're in the market for it. You can create a mechanism for other people to take all sorts of outlandish bets on stocks and options. You can reintroduce yourself at your very fancy job without a guarantee that your colleagues are going to appreciate the change. You can take a job in a big business that you're not really qualified for, and then if you don't like it, you can leave. What you can't do, according to these three interviews, is know for certain what the payoff's going to be before you take the risk. The best you can do is think carefully about the risks you want to take, think about why you want to take them, reconsider the risks you've taken already, and wonder about the risks that are still to come. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you next time.
The biggest and most consistent lie that I've told in the workplace is telling my clients and or members of Wu-Tang Clan what time the lobby call is or what time the flight is and making it an hour earlier than it actually is. But they all figured that one out a long time ago. So you just have to keep moving it back.
In terms of what causes me the most anxiety, it's when a news story I worked on didn't quite turn out like I planned. That's when you can get into trouble, when people have an unexpected negative surprise.
What's the worst thing that I've ever done professionally? Oh man, these existential questions, what is bad? There's nothing that I can recall that was not moral or not ethical. Mistakes, on the other hand, I've made plenty of those, but all of those have been good, right? They were all stepstones to succeeding, to being able to creating, to be able to actually fulfilling stuff.
I wouldn't say that I've had one sweeping gesture of generosity, you know, and you got a car, you got a car, you got a car. I've never been in that position. What I do that manifests generosity is telling people they're doing a great job and always giving them credit when it's due. And it costs nothing.
It's the Business Week Show.
Welcome to the Business Week Show. When my colleagues and I thought about what kind of themes of the magazine we want to turn into episodes of the show, we spoke about envy, failure, feuds, family, heists, generosity, legends, risk, rivals, and then we had a really far out idea. Moonshots. We reached out to many different kinds of people, including like actual real NASA astronauts. The first person that we talked to is a billionaire who is spending $100 million to try to cure a rare kind of muscular dystrophy that he has called FSHD by the year 2027. His name is Chip Wilson. He's the founder of Lululemon, and that is one of the most valuable apparel brands in the world today. But when we heard about his life and his career and his feelings about honesty and one extremely serious example of dishonesty, we decided to shoot for the moon. So, tonight's episode is built around one interview and built around the moonshots of one person who doesn't totally think they're really moonshots at all. Here is Chip Wilson. Chip, welcome to the show.
Well, thanks for having me, Max.
You've written about feeling kind of disgusted in business and in life by, I think, what you call mediocrity. You know, and that's like complaining or caution or like wallowing in embarrassment, wallowing in shame. What you want instead is, I think, what you describe as a kind of like radical, a radical greatness. What has the idea of Moonshots meant to you and to your career?
I never really thought of moonshots ever. Like, so, I mean, you're bringing this up, and I guess Peter Diamandis from Singularity University and fame in the X Prize would have been kind of the master of this kind of idea about having an idea that could make $1 billion, affect 1 billion people in the world. And so what is that? And how do you exponentially like set your company or yourself on that trajectory to get there? And of course, the big ways are setting a firm goal with a buy-win date and conditions for satisfaction, and then putting action in place in order to get there.
Am I right though, even if you're not thinking about it as moonshots, am I thinking that sort of maybe your life has been built around this idea of really kind of loathing, like an acceptance of mediocrity, and that what you want instead is to put yourself in a position to make kind of the impossible possible, which is, I guess, how I think about moonshots?
Yeah, I think more like I almost feel sorry for people that get to near the end of their life and they go, oh my God, my life is over and I really didn't go for it. And something that we'll talk about maybe later is this thing about looking at life from the stands rather than playing on the court.
By the year 2030, I think you've said you'll be unable to walk by yourself. You're about 18 months now into, I think there's a 5-year window for the $100 million US goal.
Right.
How is this new moonshot, if that's a fair word for it, how is it going?
I would say it's phenomenal. Before 2018, when we really started thinking about this Solve FSHD model that we have right now, myself and a man named Neil Camarda, who was the ex-CEO of Shell Oil in Canada, who family also has this. We belong to a firm out of the Netherlands called Fascio, and it was like the only thing dealing with FSHD in the world, and we went through about 6 or 7 years of it and $30–40 million, and nothing really came out of it. I got to the point where my muscular dystrophy was telling me like, oh my God, like I can't pretend like it's not going to happen anymore. Like it's really starting to affect me. So I went, okay, I've got to put some action in place to make this happen. And I had been studying Peter Diamandis' model about how to set up a $100 million prize and then what that does. And what it does is it brings everybody out of the woodwork. One, you get a lot of publicity for it. There's funding there, and people go, you know, I have an idea that I think can be attributed and help FSHD or maybe even cure it. But there was a lot of steps that had to get there to do that. So hopefully that gave you the foundation of where it came from.
You were diagnosed when you were, I think, like 32.
Right.
Which before Lululemon. I'm wondering if maybe an idea that there was something wrong going on, if that subconsciously put a kind of internal pressure to sort of be great in the years ahead, and that even if you weren't thinking about it, somehow it pressured you to do something like kind of extraordinary.
I would never compare myself to Steve Jobs, but I often thought about Steve, like whether internally he knew something was going on and he had to make things happen. I don't think that was necessarily it for me. I think I got diagnosed with it. I think I'm a very lucky person in that I have a very slow-moving one. There's thousands of children in wheelchairs who have it. I mean, and then I go, well, why was I so lucky to have a slow-moving one? I was always an athlete. I mean, like 3 or 4 hours a day my whole life. And so I think I was lucky to have this part of it kind of repress I guess the inflammation that occurs in the expression of the epigenetics of the expression of the DNA. So I feel like I feel I've been very lucky to have been born with the athletic love, but on the other hand, I have this problem, and
I know that you consider yourself lucky,
Yeah,
and I know that you like to think about yourself as a player on the field, and that you were a triathlete and you swam and you worked out, I think, like 2 or 3 times a day.
Sure.
Sounds very stressful to me. But I'd like to try to channel, if it's true, the feelings that, I don't know, the feelings that I live with, you know, for no particular reason. Feelings of like self-pity and anger or regret. You know, the common sort of ugliness of life. Have you gotten in touch with some of those things over the last couple of years?
Oh yeah, I definitely lived that life a lot till I was 40. And I think that I did a couple of things. I mean, I went through that period of like self-reflection at the age of 40. Read 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, The Psychology of Achievement by Tracy. I took the Landmark Forum course, read the book Good to Great by Jim Collins. And these things kind of formed a new Chip Wilson, so to speak. And it reframed who I was and how I was going to move forward. So I was able to like very easily now flex this muscle called amnesia. And amnesia is something where it's like waking up in the morning and I have no past. And if you have no past, then interestingly enough, you have no future.
Sing a slightly different tune in the memoir. You are very clear that you're really future oriented, and you describe kind of beautifully like this way of like, you do kind of talk about like living in the future. I'm curious to ask about the way in which you can put yourself in the future and the way in which, you know, I guess your success has afforded you an ability to try to change your future. So I'm wondering if you still feel as future oriented as you used to.
Oh, I'm definitely there. I think the best way to affect life in the present is to determine what my future is going to be. So I set goals for 1, 5, 10 years out. I have a 30-year vision of what my life wants to, you know, I want it to look like. And I work back from that 30-year vision to set my 10, 5, and 1-year goals. And I put actions in place in order to get there, and I get the life that I want to live.
Do you feel that you've ever been disappointed that the present doesn't turn out to be what you thought the future would hold?
I don't mind failing 50% of the time at my goals. I think failing is a muscle that very few people are used to now. And people talk about stress and mental illness. No, it's just a failure, and it's a failure to be dealt with. And I think people that learn how to deal with failure learn how to reset goals, reset conditions of satisfaction, new dates, and get on with life.
What's the connection to stress and mental illness? Do you think that sometimes people misinterpret what's really same?
Well, I mean, we've all heard of this thing called helicopter parents that have taken care of kids and doing everything for them, never let them fail, never let them have any adversity. You know, I think that that's the worst thing parents can do, and I think we're going through an epidemic right now.
All right, but you know, that's ironic though, because it was your dad who told you, I think at a swimming pool, that instead of saving your energy in a race for like later on, the final laps, that you should go all out. Will you tell us more about the poolside theory that your dad gave you? And I'm pretty sure that's like it's important to your life.
Yeah, it's really critical. Everybody in that era, it seemed like in the 60s or 70s, it was kind of like, there was always this thing about looking good at the end of the race, like sprinting the last 100 meters in a running race, or in the swim race, going to the end and hitting the wall and going, but nobody really like went full out at the beginning. And of course, it's very common now in Olympics. You can see everybody doing it. But at the time, it was rare. And so to actually like decide to go full out and fully commit, you know, had me get a Canadian record. I think it was the #2 time in the world at the time. And I went, wow, you know, like what? So now I became actually fearful, which is kind of an interesting way of being, of going through life and doing things and not committing 100%. I never wanted to get to my deathbed and go, I only gave that idea 97%. If I would have done 3% more, would I have done it, and would life have shown up differently? I never want to be on my deathbed regretting a thing.
Chip, CEOs are not known for saying what they really think, and they're not known for being willing to be themselves. You printed your own manifesto of sayings on the actual Lululemon bag.
Right.
You know, it included one I think that people ended up getting upset about. It's about children of the orgasm of life, I think.
Right.
You wrote in your memoir that I think you said something along the lines of like, I'd rather see a child have a job than just waste away.
Right.
And then in an interview with a colleague here, you said, I think some women's bodies just actually don't work for Lululemon pants. What is the point for you of talking like so brashly?
Well, I think it was the culture of Lululemon to be totally open and undefended, and to have every discussion was out on the table. I think especially when you are dressing people and you're looking at all the different types of bodies and the different personalities that want different colors, different shapes, different everything. I mean, there's 1 billion nuances that have to occur and things like that. But really, it's the psychology of like looking at people and determining who the muse is, who's actually going to buy your product, but almost as importantly, who do you not want to have buying your product? And can a brand be everything to everybody? Does that become the Gap? Well, I never wanted to become the Gap, and I certainly didn't want to become like most failed, quite frankly, American apparel companies. I wanted to be distinct. I wanted my market was a very healthy person that was interested in fun and longevity and community, and that's who my market was.
We do not need to relitigate the comment about pants, but I mean, I guess that I could sort of imagine that maybe you've learned that like it, you know, it just like hurt people's feelings, that people felt left out, and they felt left out because of things they can't control. Maybe you wouldn't say the same thing nowadays.
No, I don't think so. I think, you know, like let's face it here. I probably had done hundreds and hundreds of interviews and said thousands and thousands of things. It's just the roll of the dice, the odds that I would say something that was very truthful that is going to affects how some people think. Now, let's put it in context. I mean, that type of thing was in 2013, just at the start of social media, and nobody really understood social media or the power of it. Now, this is a very interesting statistic, and that was the third most sold book in the world is The Sorcerer's Stone by J.K. Rowling's. Okay, there's
the Harry Potter.
There's the Bible, then Mao, and then it's fascinating when you think about that. 14% of people gave it a 1 star and said it was the worst book they'd ever written. So if you kind of think about any subject or any line that anybody says about anything, you can assume at the very minimum you're going to get 14%. Now, that was a great book. So let's say the average is 22 to 23% of people are going to be vehemently opposed to anything that anybody says about anything.
Listen, I don't think, though, that we should, first of all, I don't want to harp on this too much, but saying something about, yoga pants and writing Harry Potter are different. That if 14% of people who read Harry Potter don't like it, that may be the case. But I guess to make it a little bit bigger, I'm betting that you must have a sense that you're taking a risk. You're making a bet that by saying kind of what you want about bodies or the children line on the bag or child labor, a bet that you're just going to be yourself and you're going to say what you want and you don't really care what's going to happen. I'm sort of assuming that must be like a conscious gamble in your mind, or at least it was then, maybe.
I don't think so. I think it's, it was 2013 was the entering of the stage of the world where people couldn't have an opinion anymore. Or I could have an opinion, but it didn't mean that people couldn't vehemently oppose to it verbally on a platform that would go global. I mean, before that, people said ideas all the time. What it is to be an entrepreneur is to have ideas that nobody else has.
Is there anything, I know that you really orient yourself to the future. Is there anything about the past that you wish now that you could change? Something that you did or something that you didn't do, something that you said or something that you didn't say?
No, I'd say my only regret was I had total control of Lululemon 100%. It was a cash cow making a lot of money. I had 3 kids under the age of 2, and I wanted to be a family man. So I sold to private equity and didn't really realize after selling to private equity that, that people would, I was a very trusting type of person. And, oh, it'll take us 5 years to go public. Well, we went public in a year. Everything that, they had promised me kind of flew out the window. And what really happened is I lost control of the board. And I didn't have A and B class shares, which I could have, easily asked for, and didn't know I didn't have the right advice, which is my fault. And so by not controlling the board, I lost the culture of Lululemon and the growth of where I think it should be.
So your big professional regret is selling to private equity guys and losing control of your board of directors.
No, my regret would more be like I didn't spend time developing relationships with advisors or calling people that had gone through the process before and really understanding, you know, what it is I needed to do. I think I also had surrounded myself with advisors that were also very nice, trusting Canadians, you know, and I think, you know, it's just that private equity isn't set up to, you know, to tell you the whole truth about what's going to happen 3 or 4 years down the road.
You felt you were naive.
Oh, very naive.
What do you want to say to people who are working retail jobs, maybe a job as a barista, a job with a boss, and they really crave doing their own thing, but feel like they don't have the resources or the capacity to actually try? What do you want to tell them?
Well, I think it comes back to what we've been talking about already. Like, do you want to be on your deathbed and go, I wonder if I would have done that or not? What's the point of living a life like that? I'm going to have 2 kids. I'm going to live in suburbia. At 60, I'm going to retire, become a road cyclist, and then I'm going to die. It was great because then I'd lived an entire life. If I would have like lived the life I'd already envisioned and then I died, that would be boring.
Wait, Chip, where does this idea of like the horror of a kind of like basic life come from? I mean, you asked like, what's the point of that? I mean, I can think of some reasons to do it. You know, like just like decency, you know, comfort, family, like spending time with people you love and enjoy. You know, I guess that's like a low stakes life, but I don't think it sounds as bad to me. It sounds like it kind of horrifies you.
Well, it is interesting that I think everybody makes the life basically in reaction to something that happened when they were in their childhood.
Yeah.
And what you're talking about is a type of person who maybe had a very rough childhood and very chaotic childhood. And in reaction to that, they want a very normal, safe, predictable life. Now, you could say I had a very chaotic childhood and everything, but I think my parents loved me, and I think that I was a firstborn child, and I was kind of, whatever my genetic makeup is or anything, I wasn't ever going to be happy with a normal life.
There are those of us who have a boss and a boss's boss, and sometimes a boss for that boss as well. But like, you know, we appreciate our paychecks, and we like the stability of it, you know, a sense of certainty that it offers. Can you sell us on the idea of living life your way?
Well, a leader is someone who creates a future that would otherwise not have happened. And a leader can be anybody. It can be the person, the maintenance person sweeping the floors, and it can be the CEO and everybody in between. I think you can have that life that you want to live, but it's important to be a leader to yourself. And so what does that leader do? He inspires and loves other people and makes everyone around them attain their very, very best.
Is it possible to have that life, a life of generosity and love, but without being a successful entrepreneur, just having a kind of stable job, maybe even in some ways what might look to the outside world like a mediocre job? Could it be possible to sort of be successful in your book like that?
A truly happy person is living in choice. So choice means not deciding. So deciding to do something is kind of like suicide. You're cutting off choices, where choice is really about like coming up with 4 or 5 different possibilities for how life is lived, or almost how every moment is lived. And that's really only possible by, again, having that amnesia and letting the past go and creating the present from an unknown future. So I think as long as somebody is choosing the life that they're living and not doing it in reaction to their past, then they're living a fulfilled life.
We're going to leave it there. Chip Wilson, really enjoyed having you here.
My pleasure. Thanks, Max. Okay, very good.
You just watched an interview with a billionaire who goes from one very far out challenge to the next, kind of reshaping his present by reconceptualizing his future. But it turns out he has mixed feelings about the word moonshot. If you're the kind of person who aims extremely high professionally, maybe you do too. Maybe you just do what you do. However, no matter how you feel about the word, when you take a moonshot, things do not go as planned. In fact, as you are about to see in the closing moments of our interview, things go to places that no one could have predicted. Take a look. We'll see you soon.
Yes, I can remember the last time I was dishonest, and it actually makes me quite sick. I was being interviewed by the SEC, and I think I had to say what wasn't true in order to, how can I say this? If I would have said what was true, then I would have spent 3 or 4 years in court, flying back and forth from Vancouver to who knows where in the United States, and I probably will have lost $1 billion in stock value. But more so, I just had 3 kids at a very young age, and I wasn't willing to be away from them, and that took more precedence over telling the truth.
Will you just give viewers context of, like, you know, I was here at the time and they were asking about X. The viewers are going to be like, holy what is he talking about? Will you just add in full sentences, like, just help orient viewers so they're not completely flummoxed by that?
No, I won't.
You're just going to leave it mysterious?
Yeah.
All right, well, I honestly want to know more.
Yeah, I bet you do.
Ambition and success are similar, but they are not the same. You can be ambitious and a total failure. You can be a success with no ambition at all. If you call someone ambitious, you might not even mean it as a compliment. You might be trying to say they're more of a schemer than a dreamer. The truth is, ambition can be a little embarrassing. The coolest kind of success doesn't seem effortful. It's less manifested than destined. Total ambition about everything, like no ambition about anything, isn't always so ideal. I read this thing in Bloomberg Businessweek about the Google billionaire Sergey Brin, who has spent years backing a secret mission to build giant airships. The rumors he spent more than like $250 million. Now, people don't really know what he's up to, and that can be kind of intriguing, but also kind of scary. And yet, he presses on. So how much ambition is the right amount? And who is to say? Let's be ambitious. We're gonna try to figure it out together tonight.
It's the Business Week Show.
Welcome to the Business Week Show. Tonight, ambition. The guest who's sitting at this table with me right now has been called the most exciting Black American scholar ever. And that's because the ambitious work that Dr. Cornel West does as an activist, as a philosopher, as an intellectual, as a teacher who quit Harvard not once, but twice, combines the Baptist Church with Chekhov, with Marx, with John Coltrane, with Toni Morrison, and he makes a criticism of American power and money that is bold and italicized. And now he's doing something more ambitious than ever. He is trying to put himself in the most important position in this world, and he aims for nothing less than disrupting and interrupting the landscape of power as we know it. Dr. Cornel West, thank you for being here.
It's a blessing to sit here with you, man.
It's so good to have you here.
Definitely.
Ambition is a complicated subject, but it's a deep one. When is ambition something to be ashamed of, and when is it something to revel in and celebrate?
As long as ambition has a spiritual and moral dimension to it, it's a beautiful thing. Tolstoy was ambitious. Toni Morrison was ambitious. John Coltrane was ambitious. Stephen Sondheim was ambitious. All of these folk who were ambitious really were people who had a profound vocation. See, a vocation is not the same as profession. If you're in a profession and you don't have a vocation, you're going to get caught up in the dominant forces. And what are the dominant forces of our day? Markets, buying, selling, spectacle, image, celebrity.
Let's go back.
Too much narcissism and hedonism and not enough caring and nurturing of others as well as self. But it's always been that way. See, I'm not an alarmist about that.
No? Doesn't alarm me?
Oh, no, every moment of human history. It's been a history that's pretty ugly, man. You know, the challenge has always been the self-destructive tendencies of the species.
I want to mention something about Donald Trump, which is that a year before the 2016 election, I sat with him. I reported on his corporate bankruptcies. There were many things that surprised me about being in his presence and talking to him. But one of them back then was he had never had any kind of representative role before in his life. He went from not representing anyone politically to being president. I think it's essentially fair to say the same thing about you. Tell us about why you're qualified in a way that he wasn't in this life you've had where you've done many things, but being a political leader in the regular sense is not one of them.
Yeah, I mean, one is that anytime you engage in high quality service to others, no matter what the context, you have to come with a spirit of humility. You learn and listen. So I'd have to have some high quality folk around me who have spent time in the machinations of the system. But you're right, never holding office. So I'd have to come in with a spirit of humility. But most important, you see, we're at the edge of a cliff when it comes to the United States. It's a very, very sad moment because the worst of any country, just like the worst of any human being, is allowed that hatred and greed, especially when it's organized, institutionalized, and routinized. It's just almost subversive to try to have integrity, honesty, and decency in a lot of our context. So for me, my role is to reintroduce America to the best of itself. Because we've had some great figures and traditions in the United States. We really have.
have a financial question. You
Yes.
mentioned the word accountability. You know,
Yeah.
there are reports that you have owed hundreds of thousands of dollars
Absolutely.
in federal taxes, and then a
Absolutely.
smaller amount, I think tens of thousands of dollars in child support.
Yeah, that was the one that was a lie. I've never actually had any child back
Okay.
payment in that sense, though.
Let's talk
But
about
the taxes,
taxes.
very much. Oh, yes.
It's fair to hold candidates to really high standards.
I agree.
What happened so that you didn't pay, you know, whatever was owed?
Well, one, I've always been broke as the Ten Commandments financially. I've had heavy debts and obligations, both with family as well as getting behind. You see, I had student loans when I first came out, and I got behind way back in the 80s. And there was a time when I had multiple audits. I had knocks on the door to get a subpoena Christmas Eve. And I said, dang, could you all wait for another day? I know I'm behind. But the good news has always been that I set up installment plans. And I've always done that because it's true, and I think that people are right to raise these questions, that money's never really meant that much to me. It really, as long as I can keep my money flow, I live from paycheck to paycheck. And that's true for 63% of my fellow citizens in the country. Richest nation in the history of the world. You got CEOs running around here multi-million dollars every year. And these precious citizens barely making it. I do, in fact, recognize my checks are bigger, but my debts are bigger. And I've always been chasing that next check in order to make it, but I've always been open about that.
Is it something that you're going to work on, I guess, now and but before the election to try
Well,
to
it's the
clear
same
away?
because I've always had the installment plans in place. But you see, the important thing is, you know, the great Melville, our greatest novelist, he used to say that truth is a ragged edge. He said, if you're really committed to truth, it means you're not just speaking truth to powerless, you're also speaking truth to yourself. See, and that's Socratic, isn't it?
It's not
That's
easy.
self-examination, that's self-scrutiny. And it takes a certain kind of courage to do that. Not just in private, but in public.
Are there things that you've found when you look inside that you don't like?
For myself? Oh, absolutely. I'm a human being. I'm a cracked vessel, my brother. I got revolutionary potential. I got thuggish proclivities. And I'm wrestling with this every day. Kendrick Lamar has the same wrestling. I like that. Any decent human being does. Michael Hurley does.
Michael Hurley.
Oh, yes, those valley of tears that he finds himself in, stealing the right to live. Tell the truth, Brother Michael, about yourself. But he bounced back. Tupac bounces back. I attempt to bounce back, but it's human, all the way down, Brother Max.
Let's talk about capitalism. Do you feel optimistic, something akin to optimistic about American capitalism? Can you imagine a world where capitalism somehow allows us to fix climate change, to somehow heal inequality? Can you envision a world where that happens?
Well, one is that you can never downplay the creativity of human beings. There's no doubt that the virtues of markets have to do with scientific breakthroughs and technological innovations. It's a beautiful thing. What you have to do is to make sure the markets are subordinate to public welfare. But unfortunately, especially in the United States, it's very difficult to be optimistic about American capitalism. It's had a long time to generate these results. That, I mean, in my campaign, I'm calling for an abolition of poverty, abolition of homelessness, strong defense of workers, strong defense of women, control over bodies and so forth, and a real accountability of the organized greed at the top. You see, so in that sense, I wouldn't say optimistic, but I'm not optimistic about anything.
You're not?
Very important. Oh, no.
You seem like an optimist to me.
Oh, no, I'm a blues man. There's no optimism in the blues.
I want to ask you not about what other people think, but about what you would think and how you would self-examine if the day came when, as Republicans, I think, ambitiously hope in their own way, you peel off votes from Biden, Trump wins. How will it square with your values and your internal voice? What would happen on that day if that day came?
I think we have to be, even in the political context, even though we're aware of strategic and tactical considerations, you do have to be honest about what's inside of you. And let me give you an example of this. I mean, you know 40% of U.S. citizens don't vote at all, and that's what I'm targeting. And 62% of those who vote third party, either libertarian or green, say they would never, ever, ever vote for Democrats or Republicans. So we're only talking about a small slice. But I can tell you this, the flip side is, if I remain silent, or if I begin talking about how wonderful Biden is when I don't believe it, that's a violation of my integrity. So that I do understand, you know, that kind of finger pointing, you are the cause of fascism in America because you got 4% and so and so and so. Yes, that's something that I wrestle with. That's part of that Civil War, the battlefield of my soul, too.
What I'm learning is that your real ambition is to be a kind of transcendent existential pressure inside the country to provide something that you think is not there.
Well, it's a beautiful way of putting it, but I wouldn't use the word transcendent. See, I'm a funk master. It's not transcendent. It's immanent. It's grounded in the culture and lived experiences of ordinary people, of those Sly Stone call everyday people. And that's true for all of the social movements. They have transcendent visions because it embraces everybody, no matter what color and gender and so forth. But it is in the funk. And the problem of America is it tends to deodorize its funk. When you're playing your guitar, you know where the funky notes are, you see.
The only wrong thing you said is that I don't think I'm a very funky guitar player.
Well, you sound good to me.
Okay,
So I'm telling you that.
I'll take it. Dr. Cornel West, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Really, really enjoyed it.
This was wonderful, though, brother.
It was wonderful for me. Coming up next, a director, a model, an activist. But is she ambitious? Stay tuned. What do you call it when high-end American fashion all but leaves out the faces of black women? You call it high-end American fashion. The guest who's sitting with me at this table didn't just reshape what beauty looks like on TV, in magazines, and on runways. She helped debunk the myth that the imagery of black beauty does not sell. Beth Ann Hardison's ambition as a model agency owner, and as an advocate wasn't just to thrive, which she did, it was to blaze paths for other people to follow. And now, at 81, she is the co-director and the subject of an ambitious new film called Invisible Beauty. Beth Ann Hardison, so glad you're here.
Thank you.
Can we talk about just like the very specific word ambition? There's something I think maybe sometimes it's like has a little glow of nastiness maybe, you know, like
No.
ambition sounds a little bit meaner than like drive or determination. To me, you're such an interesting and ambitious person. What does how do you even feel about the word?
It's not like I don't like the word. I just don't think that I really am the one who really demonstrates it in the way that I think it's meant. Ambition to me is someone who actually plans to actually do something and do it in such a way that they work towards it, like becoming a doctor, a singer, a musician. The ambition has to be there. The passion has to be there. I come along like a troubleshooter, but it's not a plan before that until I see the problem. To me, that's just like someone who's a house cleaner. You know, they're domestic. They just go, oh, there's dust on the thing. Oh, let me just wipe that off.
And that's you.
That's me to me.
I want to ask you about your son though, because when you modeled, you always kept a second job.